The Cantina on Xerion Prime was filled with the usual mix of mercenaries, traders, and veterans from a dozen different star systems. Blue smoke from Altyrian dream pipes hung in the air like ghostly tendrils, while the soft hum of conversation in various alien tongues created a background symphony of interstellar commerce. Commander Zarkth Thor sat alone in the corner booth, his forearms wrapped around a glass of fermented Polarian nectar. The scars that crisscrossed his chitinous exoskeleton told the story of countless battles fought across the galaxy. His compound eyes, dulled by age and too much alcohol, stared into the amber liquid as if seeking answers to questions he'd rather not ask. The younger Vrex mercenaries at the neighboring table had been boasting loudly about their recent victories against various species, Centaurian rebels, Tau Ceti pirates, even a skirmish with some rogue and Romudans. Their bragging had grown increasingly bold as the night wore on, fueled by cheap synthetic alcohol and the bravado of those who had never faced true horror. "The humans are next on our list," announced Krikstal, the loudest of the group. His mandibles clicked with arrogant satisfaction. "High Command says they've been expanding too quickly into our territory. Time to teach these pink-skinned primitives their place in the galactic order." The Cantina fell quiet. Several older patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances that spoke of shared knowledge and unspoken warnings. But Zarkth Thor remained motionless, his scarred hands tightening around his glass. "You think it'll be easy money," continued another mercenary, slapping Krikstal's shoulder with his secondary arm. "From what I hear, they barely have functional starships. Still fighting with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Probably surrender the moment they see our plasma arrays." A harsh laugh escaped from Zarkth Thor's throat, causing the entire group to turn toward him. The old commander's eyes remained fixed on his drink, but his voice carried across the suddenly silent Cantina. "You know nothing about humans," he said quietly. Krikstal bristled at the interruption. "And what would an old fossil like you know about current intelligence reports?" Zarkth Thor finally looked up, his compound eyes focusing on the young mercenary with the intensity of a targeting system. "Because I fought them 37 years ago, during the Kepler Campaign." The temperature in the Cantina seemed to drop several degrees. The Kepler Campaign was legendary among military circles, a disastrous attempt by the Vrex Empire to claim a small cluster of human colonies. Most veterans refused to speak about it, and official records had been sealed by High Command. "The Kepler Campaign was a victory," Krikstal said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "We annexed 3 human systems. We lost 14 fleets," Zarkth Thor corrected, his voice growing darker. 14 fleets against a species that hadn't even achieved faster than light travel 50 years earlier. The old commander stood slowly, his movements betraying the phantom pain of old wounds. He walked to the mercenaries' table, uninvited, and sat down across from Krikstal. "You want to know about fighting humans? Let me tell you what your precious High Command doesn't want you to know." Zarkth Thor's secondary hands began unconsciously tracing the deepest scar across his thorax while he spoke. "We expected them to fight like every other species, with logic, with self-preservation, with some concept of acceptable losses. We thought we understood warfare because we'd conquered 17 different civilizations." He paused to take a long drink, the liquid doing nothing to wash away the bitter taste of memory. "Humans don't fight wars. They fight extinctions. Every single engagement, from skirmish to fleet action, they approach with the mentality that they're fighting for the survival of their entire species." "That's ridiculous," one of the younger mercenaries interjected. "It's just tactical doctrine." "Is it?" Zarkth Thor's laugh was devoid of humor. "When we took their first colony, they didn't negotiate. They didn't offer tribute. They didn't surrender. Do you know what they did?" The table had grown silent. "They built weapons that could crack planets. Not military installations planets. They looked at our superior technology, our overwhelming numbers, our tactical advantages, and decided that if they couldn't win conventionally, they'd make the cost of victory so high that we'd prefer extinction to conquest. Zarkth Thor's voice had dropped to a whisper, but every word carried the weight of witnessed horror. We intercepted their communications during the siege of Terra Nova. Their military leaders weren't discussing surrender terms or evacuation plans. They were calculating how many of us they could kill before their ammunition ran out. Their civilian leaders weren't negotiating for their people's lives. They were voting on whether to activate something they called Protocol 7. What was Protocol 7? Krikstal asked, despite himself. We never found out. Because when we realized what we were really fighting, we withdrew from the system rather than risk finding out. The old commander stood, his movements heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. You see, young mercenaries, every other species in the galaxy, fights to win. Humans fight to end the war. Permanently. Win or lose, they'll make sure it's the last war anyone ever fights with them. He turned to leave, then paused. They've had 37 years to prepare since Kepler. 37 years to develop new weapons, new strategies, new ways to make victory so costly that defeat becomes preferable. And you think they're primitives with metal projectiles? Zarkth Thor walked toward the exit, his final words echoing in the silent cantina. When you meet them in battle, remember this: they're not trying to defeat you. They're trying to make sure that in 1,000 years, when someone mentions humans, every species in the galaxy will remember why you don't start wars with them. The door closed behind him, leaving the young mercenaries alone with their rapidly cooling drinks and the growing realization that they might have just accepted a contract for their own extinction.